What's up, guys? JP Podcast, episode 17. And today, I got to say this right, Igor Vainshtein.
Hey, you got it really well.
We practiced a couple times before. I got to be honest here. So, entrepreneur, built a company, sold a company, author, practical manifestation, next book, agile manifestation, coming out.
That's right.
And also inventor of a board game, you guys. Board game, okay? Very kind of you, by the way. Shane pitched him when he came in. We're doing a pink party, and he's donating this to the pink party as one of our raffles. So thank you for the donation.
Pleasure.
For Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Appreciate that. Very kind of you.
Man.
But we're also buying one so we could play it in the office. This was inspired, you said, through Robert Kiyosaki's game. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's
Igor?
right. Yeah, Cashflow 101. I played it, got 25 years ago now. It makes me sound really old. But, that game has actually stood the test of time. Like, think about it. It's still for sale, and it's had like a updated version, and it's sold hundreds of thousands of copies. And it inspired me. That's kind of one of my journeys. Definitely started with that. So...
Well,
yeah.
let's jump into it, man. Tell us about who you are a little bit for the audience that doesn't know you, please.
Sure, of course. So, born in former USSR, nice little communist place. It was a little state called Moldova, next to Ukraine. I spent most of my childhood in Ukraine. My mom's from Ukraine, I often tell the story that I was kind of born a little bit different. Wasn't meant to be in a socialist communist place. I was kind of born a capitalist. There's this story that when I was little, when I was about 7 years old, I went to a sleepaway camp in Ukraine, in Sevastopol.
You went to a what camp?
A sleepaway, like overnight, a couple of nights away camp with school, and there was a beach trip. I hated the beach back then, second day on the beach, I filled up. There was no water anywhere on the beach, right? It was communism, right? There's no vending machines of water fountains. So I gathered some glass jars and filled them with water, took them to the beach, and I sold it. I don't know what inspired it. I just remember doing it. And when I go back to Moldova, to my hometown, my parents actually got hauled into the Communist Party headquarters and basically told off, chastised for raising, and I quote, and this is the funny part, how true it became. They said, "You are raising a little capitalist pig."
Wow.
Right? And my parents were very proud. And so they're like, "We got to get out of this joint." And so they worked really hard to get us out to Australia. So we moved to Australia when I was almost 11, 91, and grew up in Australia, and started my first business at about 16, building websites. It was like the internet just started, and I started my first business while still finishing school, and then went to college. Started, read Rich Dad Poor Dad, played the game, got into property, built up, became a millionaire at 22.
Wow,
lost everything by 23. Went into another business, started another company out of desperation, built up a $4.5 million company, consulting company, by 27, lost everything by 28. And done that a few times, but more recently, I built up an e-commerce manufacturing company in golf. Moved to the US 3 years ago, expanded my business here, expanded to Europe as well, and then a year in the US, and the American dream came true. I got acquired by a big golf company. Thank you, and went on a bit of a journey to kind of share some of the things that I've learned over those years, most of them being down at rock bottom, which is where I spend most of my time before kind of somehow getting to where I am.
Well, what a great story, by the way. There's so many questions I have in there. Let's go backwards a little bit. So you said, and for me, when I hear that, like, you're raising a little communist pig.
Capitalist.
Capitalist
pig.
Capitalist.
In the communist
My
place.
brain flipped it.
Yeah.
My brain flipped it. So capitalist pig. The disgust there of looking at a child that wants to do better in life and judging them, but the manipulation of the mind.
Yeah.
How old when you guys moved to Australia from
I was
Moldova?
almost 11.
You were almost 11.
Yeah.
So your parents, they were raised in that environment, but they didn't have that belief system.
That's correct.
Or did they?
No, they did. No, absolutely, they did not. And
okay.
Yeah, they knew in their heart, like the propaganda And the brainwashing that worked on millions on 100 million people, wherever the population was of the USSR, did not work on them.
Do you remember any of that brainwashing or propaganda?
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely.
What was the most powerful brainwashing or propaganda that you saw that affected people?
So I'll give you a couple of examples, right?
Please.
And it's interesting. I have amnesia from the first 10 years of my life, which is a really interesting thing.
Okay.
And it's not so much from trauma, it's just from so much happened when I moved to Australia. But there was key moments I still remember, and I feel like they're very defining. So I'll give you an example in terms of that sort of brainwashing of a child. We were prepared for war. And that might sound extreme, but let me tell you, when in our physical education class, this is grade 4 we're talking about, I learned how to throw anti-tank grenades. We did exercises as part of PE. So I can tell you right now, you have to roll on the ground, lie flat, so the tank goes over you because they got flat bottoms. And you wait till it's passed and you get up and you throw the grenade on the back because that's where the fuel tanks are.
Wow.
I learned that when I was like 8, and I still remember that. Why would I remember that? Right? Why does a child need to learn these things? But it was just this adversarial upbringing of us versus them, us versus the capitalist scum.
Wow.
And I still remember that. And I just never bought into it, and I was a rebel, and I got into a lot of trouble. There were many other examples, but they just didn't work.
Do you think that you said when I was a rebel, and you kind of went into, hey, I'm going to sell this water on the beach, and then I'm going to go do this, and I'm going to build websites. That foundation of entrepreneurship, and back then, you're not looking at it as an entrepreneur.
Correct.
You're looking at it as, hey, I want to make some money. I want some things for myself, so let me go work hard.
That's right. I just want more.
You just want more.
And I remember, and in fact, I often, it's interesting. This moment I forget sometimes until like it comes up in conversation like this. I was sitting with one of my best friends back in the day, Edward. I still remember him, and we're sitting on a park bench. I remember the exact park bench in this apartment complex where I grew up in Chisinau. And I remember him asking, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I said, I want to build empires.
You're how old?
I was like 9.
I want to build empires.
I want to build empires. And I remember, I said empires because I used to play this computer game called Civilization, but Sid Meier, right? It was my favorite game. Even back in Russia, it just came out, and I got into computers at a very young age. I was very lucky because my dad's a software engineer.
Okay.
And so we had access to computers when most people didn't. But I remember that was like, it resonated with me so deeply that I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to build empires. And I knew it somehow. And so, but the other thing I will say is, my parents, who I'm very grateful for, they brought me up with this belief. They said to me always, they said, you can have anything you want in life as long as you're willing to work for it. Right? They said there is no limit. The only limit is what you put on yourself. And now I have kids, and I am absolutely trying to raise little capitalist pigs.
That's right.
Absolutely maxing that out, and they're already little entrepreneurs.
That's
my daughter's almost
shirt.
6. Yeah,
I'm a little.
I should actually do that. In fact, yeah, it's a good idea. My son's almost 10, my daughter's almost 6, and they're little entrepreneurs, and I couldn't be more proud.
That's great, man. So I think that's amazing that your parents saw that and they're like, we need to move. So you were the spark for them moving. Would you say that was the case?
I think so. I think they knew that. Look, there's one more factor. We're Jewish. So one of those stories, as an example, I remember from school. I mean, 2 stories. When I was in kindergarten, the teachers used to beat me with a plastic shovel. Right, that was just normal because they didn't like Jews. And at school, at elementary school, like grade 3 or 4, one of my best friends, I remember, Sergey, was Ukrainian, and the teacher would separate us, and they would yell at us, and they say, Ukrainians are supposed to hate Jews, so you're not allowed to be friends.
Wow.
This is teachers at school.
Wow.
And so when my parents were raising it, they're like, how can we bring up a child? And I can only imagine how painful it was for them being a father now. How do you bring up a child with a bright future in an environment like that?
Yeah, I know. I have kids now. My son's 2, my boy's 7 months, and my next one's on the way.
Wow.
And there's no way in the world I would allow for anybody to treat them that way. And I think there's a lot of people that feel that way, but they're kind of stuck. They are. And it's super unfortunate because you live a lie. What we need to be outside.
Yes. But
this is really who we are, and it's great that I think America people devalue what America is in the world.
And it's a great point you make. I saw you had my friend Mark on your podcast.
Yes,
I think 2 episodes ago, and him and I had exactly the same phrase, which he spoke to you about, which is, for all the people that think this country is not the greatest country in the world, go live in North Korea, go live in like Nigeria, or Ukraine or Russia, and then let's have a conversation. But don't judge what you don't know.
Yeah.
And being an immigrant twice, right? Having moved countries twice, and Australia is a great place. It's an amazing country, but God, I love this country.
So thank you for sharing that. So your parents are like, man, we want to give him a better opportunity. We're moving to Australia.
Yes.
So now you're new in Australia, and you get involved in, you said websites. So you're still, you said, I want to build empires. I want to grow. What's your biggest reason? Because I know why I'm an entrepreneur. Like, what's your biggest reason for being an entrepreneur?
That's a great question. Earlier on, so we grew up, obviously being new immigrants, I grew up very poor. And I remember, going to school and just not having stuff that everyone else had. And I remember actually this interesting moment where, it's actually not a moment, it was like a whole part of my life where I was like, I'm going to show them all, that revenge, like in the movies, whatever revenge movie about kids you can imagine. I kind of had that feeling like I'm going to have a Ferrari one day, and I'm going to, and everyone's going to be jealous, and I'll show them. So initially it was this drive to have what others, were dreaming about and they didn't have because they had things I didn't have. And then I had a Ferrari, and it didn't solve any of that. And in fact, it was through this whole process of my life where, I was quite, I went through great success, as I may have mentioned, but I also was miserable and depressed. And so my evolution of the why has actually changed a lot. And I would say in the last probably 10, 15 years, especially more recently, my real driver is to just change the world. I can't remember who said this, but maybe Steve Jobs said, there are people in this world that look at the world and mold themselves to it, and there are others that look at the world and mold the world to themselves. And they're the ones who create change in this world, right? And I wanted to be that person.
Do you have a specific change that you want to make, like when people look back on your life and they say, "Hey, this is what he did"? Is it specific?
It's not specific.
Okay.
It is more around just making a lot of change, like having the vision that I see for the world, the better vision. I love AI, I love robotics, I love golf. So there's all these other. There's a myriad of industries that I want to have an impact on.
Got it.
But in terms of change itself, and it's an interesting one. You being sort of a dad, newish dad, right? It's someone also said before I was a father. They said before trying to change the world, when you have kids, you just want to change their world first, and then take care of the rest of the world. And that's also become my massive driver. Is I look at my kids and I want their world to be the most amazing world they live in, and what I can do for them, and the rest of the world comes kind of second.
Dude, I was thinking about that this morning. We have 4 Labradoodles, and looks like we have 20 Labradoodles when I have to clean them every single morning. And I was sitting there and I was just saying, I was just thinking while picking up a bunch of dog poop. That's where I do my best thinking.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, I'm not really driven by fame. I'm not driven by power over other people, but I'm definitely driven by people having power over me and not having power over me, better yet.
Yes.
And then as I started thinking about the future of the world, I'm like, man, I'm not driven by politics, but then I also understand how that world can influence the world for my kids.
Well, we saw it recently with the pandemic. I mean, look at how many people were so powerless through that process. I get you. I mean, Melbourne, where I was during that pandemic, had the longest lockdown on the planet, 286 days, if memory serves me
we would
correctly.
watch videos of people just going outside and like getting arrested and getting beaten.
Yeah. I remember a guy got arrested for taking his trash can out onto the street, and the police were there and they arrested him. This was all over the news. You think back now, I have this joke, like, we must live in a simulation, because in the real world, crazy stuff like could not possibly happen.
Yeah, it looks like it's a movie.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Couldn't make it up.
And I would want to know your thoughts on that here in a second as well, on what that experience was like, because it's unreal. But to finish that point of understanding, like, I need to create a world for my kids.
Yes.
I need to influence that at least, as best as I can. And so I really admire that. I want to, since we're already here, let's actually talk about that. What's that like when you're in Australia at that moment? And I don't do a lot of COVID stuff or talk about it, but like in your brain, being the fact that you're like, I can't be controlled. Like, I need to express.
I don't do well with rules.
Yeah. And now you're like, no, you can't go put your trash can outside.
Yeah. I mean, it was ludicrous. And it actually triggered a lot of what I'd call trauma from where I came from, right? Because we came from a place that told you what you could eat, what you could buy, what you could not buy, what you could say, what you could think, all of that, right? And so it triggered a lot of those thoughts, and it was pretty horrible to observe. And we struggled. There was a moment I remember going with kids to the playground, right? When in that time when it was actually open, because they actually they took down basketball hoops from outdoor basketball playgrounds, right? So that you could, like, who thinks of that? But I remember a couple of moments, and this goes back to the whole, I think, entrepreneur mindset, which is probably the thing that drives me most, and what I want to impart on my kids. We went to I'll never forget this scene. We go to a playground, it's a beautiful day. Finally, the playgrounds are open. There's 150 kids climbing all over, all the playground equipment, right? My kids were like 2 and 5, 2 and 6. And they all have snot, and they're all, like coughing and this, and they're running around, they're wiping on each other, and they're wiping snot on that. Like, you can imagine, like that playground is a cesspool of disease at that point. And my wife and I walked up to that playground, and we are the only ones breaking the law by not wearing masks. And and the parents, the kids run up to them, they take the mask, they give them a cuddle, and they go back. I'm like, you've just been exposed to like 20 disease. Like, what's that? What's that surgical mask gonna do for you?
Yeah.
And then Karina, my wife Karina, and I would look at each other like, do these people not think? Like, can you not just have, like, for 1 second, just think about what's going on right now? And we were literally, out of like 60 parents, the only parents not wearing a mask. And that's my thing. Like, how do we get to a point where people are willing to go along with it?
Yeah.
And that's what brought back this whole Soviet Union mentality of, you go along with, this socialism, this whole thing where someone else does the thinking for you.
Yeah.
And I think that's what entrepreneurs, that's what people like you and I think, that's what we excel at, is we construct our own model of the world, and we're just not willing to compromise on that model of the world.
Yeah.
And we kind of go down that path.
That's powerful. I'll never forget, it's like peak of COVID. We're on a boat in the ocean. We rent this boat to take our guys out. And I look to my left, and I have 2 people on a Sea-Doo wearing masks.
Wait, I got a better one. I remember going to the beach in Melbourne, Australia with the kids to play in the sand. There are people in the water with a mask on. I kid you not.
Yeah, the level of just insanity.
This
and
must
then
be
I would see people at the gas stations, and they're like, with a mask, but they're touching all the pumps. I'm like, what are you really that concerned? Like, it doesn't make any sense. But
I know.
So is that part of the reason why you left Australia?
I mean, look, I have to give some credit to COVID, right? Because my business went crazy through COVID, because I was selling golf simulators.
Oh,
right? That was my business. So
that makes so much sense. I didn't even connect that till right now.
That went nuts. And if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have expanded to the US. So a lot of people suffered, and I am well aware of that. I had a lot of friends with small business in hospitality, absolutely decimated through that period. But my business went crazy.
Were you already in that business prior to COVID?
Yes. So okay. I was about 3 years.
Okay.
Well, I was in golf. I got into the golf industry in 2011 by complete accident.
Were you a golfer?
I was not a golfer.
I'm a golfer, but you get into the golf business.
I was a geek. I was an IT guy.
Okay.
And I was working. This is through one of my rock bottom kind of times. I had to kind of climb my way out. So I went and got a job as a consultant, management consultant in the tech space. And I was working for a company. And then my best friend, Damon, he was a good golfer. And he's like, hey, you should get into golf. I'm like, why would I want to get into golf? It's for old people. And he's like, just come try. And I tried, and I went to this indoor place called GolfTek Australia, and had a lesson, hit some balls on a simulator, and it just got hooked. And Damon and I ended up buying the business because it was going out of business. So we bought it for next to nothing, and one of the guys that managed it became our third partner, and we moved it to downtown Melbourne and into the building where I was working. So there was a retail space, about 6,000 square feet, that was for rent. And I'm like, we should move it here. It's right in the middle of downtown. And we did. And that's how I completely by accident got into the whole golf industry. And talking about an interesting loop. So one day, about a year into the ownership, year and a half, this is 2012, I get a phone call from the US from a guy named Joe Assel and his right-hand man, Steve Barrelly. And they're like, I'm the founder of GolfTek. I'm like, GolfTek? How? And anyway, why do you have our name? Because we have the trademark. I'm like, well, he's like, who the hell are you? I'm like, well, who the hell are you? We had a chat. We became friends. We tried to merge the businesses. It didn't work. Long story short.
Same name, GolfTek.
The same
GolfTek.
name. Exactly. The same name. Okay. Identical spelling, the same name.
Okay.
But never burn your bridges. We stayed friends. We stayed in contact. I got acquired by GolfTek.
Wow. That's so
10 years later.
Because if you would have said, hey, screw you, here's this, such a short-term thinker,
exactly,
that would have maybe never happened.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think it's a good lesson for business and for entrepreneurs. Don't burn your bridges. Also, don't be a bad person.
Yeah.
Just respect other people. So in the end, now I'm with GolfTek, and one of the it's the biggest teaching golf lesson company in the world, and doing amazing things. So to be part of that whole journey, to kind of close the loop on that was truly amazing.
So walk me through the process. You go with your friend. You love it. You get hooked. You're like, let's buy this business. You move the business.
Yep.
From that of just one location in downtown, what was your vision at that time? Were you like, hey, we're going to do this. Everybody needs to have one of these?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, we wanted to open multiple locations. We saw, at that time, GolfTek USA had like 180 locations. They're about 250, 260 now.
Were you aware of them at that time?
No, this is like after the phone call.
Okay.
At first, we're like, this is really cool. We should do this. So, it's virtual golf. It's, it was pretty new back, 12, 13 years ago.
Okay.
And then when we met these guys, like, wow, we can open more of these. Were
you trying to open with them, or you're like, hey,
no,
I love that concept of what they've done?
What we actually try to do is we try to raise capital in Australia to merge the businesses together to kind of buy a master franchise. But capital raising in Australia, not quite as good as here.
Okay.
Anywhere near as good as here. And so we raised a whole of $0.
Okay.
Yeah, zero. And
that's hard to do.
Yeah. I like you'd think like someone give you at least $10,
something,
right? Like $10, like just give me something.
Gotcha.
No, zero. And so we were like, well, maybe we should do it ourselves, and we tried, and then, but the story gets interesting because I got burnt. I gave up my tech career, which I was earning a couple of $100,000 a year for 5 years of building this business and trying to get it profitable and whatever, and ended up nearly breaking my back. I in the end, we kind of lost money on it, and I needed to get out. So I sold my share to the other two partners, said, look, I want to do something else. And I actually started this brand called 24/7 Golf. And my idea was, I looked at all these.
I got to stop you real quick just so I'm following the story.
Yeah, right.
So you're talking about you sold your shares of GolfTek.
As in, for next to nothing.
Okay, got it.
I just said, just have it, whatever. Right?
Okay, got it.
To my partners, right?
Okay.
We were having a lot of conflict.
Okay.
And like this, especially with Damon being one of my best friends. In fact, I was just with him in Vegas a few days ago for his 50th.
That's cool.
So we stayed. We went through a bit of a turbulent time as friends, but we're still best friends.
Got it.
So
you sold your shares to the partners.
I sold because I wanted to do something else. I actually already started something else while I was still like with the GolfTek Australia business. And I said, look, I don't want to mix the two. I want to do this on my own. I have my own vision, and so I said, I'll give me a little bit for this, whatever. I move on, and I wanted to open my own, and my own was called 24/7 Golf, and I looked at the business model of the 24-hour gyms. And I went, why didn't I do that, but for golf, so you can go practice 24 hours a day? That's what the
back then that wasn't the case.
No, there was. I was the first. I may have been the first in the world. I don't know. As far as I knew.
Got it.
And I opened my first one right next to my house where we used to live, and it did okay. We got up to like 120 members. It was profitable. A little bit of profit. I had 2 bays, 2 golf simulators. Then I went and opened another one in downtown with 4 simulator bays, and that completely flopped. I borrowed another $100,000 from my parents, which I lost, and flopped. And I had all this equipment. I'm like, what am I going to do with it? I have to sell it. So I went on Facebook Marketplace and I listed it, and I sold it pretty quickly. And then I never heard from the people again, right? Because when I had this venue, I had a lot of people, they couldn't figure out how to switch it on. It was support was an issue. And then I sold it and I never heard from them. I'm like, wow, this was easy. So I went and ordered a few more, sold that, and I went, oh, screw this. I'm not doing this 24/7. Like, so I kept the name. Like, I closed down my other venue, the first one I opened, and I just started selling online.
That's the magic of being an entrepreneur.
Yes.
Is that you transition this problem to an opportunity, but you caught it though. See, I think that's the difference. I think there's so many people that don't catch those opportunities. See, somebody says something, somebody sees something, they don't do anything with it. You're like, hey, let me go try.
I totally agree. And there's a great book, The Trick to Money is Having Some. That one of my favorite books. I forget the author is a philosopher. He passed away about 10 years ago, but he said he has this whole lecture on the trick to money is having some, and he says if you want to be successful, there's a really easy formula. It says find a problem, find how many people have that problem, find how much they're willing to pay to solve that problem.
Yeah,
you will get paid. That's the simplest formula there is.
Say it again for
success.
the audience real quick.
Right, so find the problem.
Yep.
Right, because so many people fall in love with their idea. They fall in love with the idea, not with the problem. Right, so find the problem, find how many people have that problem. How much are they willing to pay to have that problem solved? Go solve that problem. Those people will pay you.
Yeah.
Simple.
Yeah.
Right? Google solved the problem of organizing the information of the world.
Yes.
And made billions and tens of billions. And look at OpenAI. It just got valued at $150-something billion for the latest cap raise, right? They're solving a pretty big problem, and all the other AI companies. But you can do it on a small scale, right? And I thought I was solving one problem with the 24-hour venue because people wanted to experience this, but it was so limited. But the bigger problem was people actually just wanted to have golf simulators.
So you have the two, you open the other one with 4, the 4 goes out of business.
That's right.
You sell the equipment.
Right.
And all of a sudden you're like, hey, there's an opportunity here to sell equipment.
Yeah, it was easy.
Okay.
It's like, wow, I didn't have to pitch them.
Why would they buy the equipment from you versus just buying it somewhere online? Did it not exist? Was it not marketed?
So in Australia, it didn't really exist.
Oh,
and also
okay.
it was an interesting point in the market where the price point was going from $100,000 to $60,000 to $30,000, and I sold it for $5,000.
Got it.
So I hit the price point.
Okay.
And then what the next evolution of that whole process was you couldn't get all the accessories, so like the enclosure, the screen, the mat, easily in Australia. You had to import it from the US.
Okay.
Double the cost. So I'm like, well, what if I make it? So I went found factories in China and I made it. And I started bringing them in containers and started selling it cheaper than anyone else could. And all of a sudden my business boomed. And then obviously COVID hit, and then it really boomed. And then, yeah.
So you're selling all these for people to have at their personal residence or home?
Yes, for home, yeah. For home, garage, office, whatever. Not commercial. I explicitly did not want to go into commercial venues because they were a different market.
Okay, got it. And so what happens next? How many did you sell? What did that look like? How many years were you selling?
I was probably selling for 3 years. I was 2 or 3 years selling it, pretty small. Then it was a big thing for me to get a warehouse. But I had to get a warehouse because I had containers coming in, right? So got a couple of containers, started selling those. And obviously because you're manufacturing, right, your margins are really good. Reality is you're not reselling other people's product, you're selling your own.
Yeah.
And then I saw the opportunity that the prices in the US were still quite high. And I looked at the price of what's selling as my competitors and what I was making them for, and I'm like, this margin is really big. I can go in and I can disrupt the market. And I did. And that's what allowed me to grow, is that I was just undercutting everyone because I could deliver the same quality as everyone else at 40% cheaper.
Wow.
Right? And when I got acquired, the whole point of it was that I had this whole manufacturing supply chain, this vertical integration. And that's what, it was a strategic purchase. And that's what brought value to the company that bought me.
That makes sense because they weren't manufacturing their own?
Correct. So they were in golf lesson business. They acquired a golf simulator company, the technology, the box that tracks the ball. And then they're like, well, we're selling this box, but whoever buys that box needs all this other stuff. And they're like, well, where are they getting it? They're getting it from there or from there or from there. And I was actually pitching them at the time to sell my stuff. I said, I'll be your like a white label supplier. Like you sell it and I'll supply you. And then one day, Joe Assel, the same guy that called me 10 years earlier, calls me. He's like, hey, I know you've been pitching us. So instead of buying your product, we'll just buy a company. And the rest is history, as they say.
So tell us, what was it like selling your company?
It was an interesting experience because it was strategic buy. We had to do this. It's not like, people think of a company acquisition as like, oh, look, I make $10 million. I make $2 million profit. Standard industry is 3 times, EBITDA. I'll sell for $6 million. I get a check. I go and, buy a boat and a Lamborghini and go retire in Miami or whatever. That's not like, that's a very small amount of businesses that happens to, right? When it's a strategic buy, they're buying it for a reason. They can take your company and sell to their customers and all that. So we had to kind of figure out this deal where I had to convince them with my belief in my product and my supply chain that it would add a lot of value to them. And so we ended up doing a deal where we shared in the upside of the joint venture, right? So it wasn't like, oh, just give me the money and off I go. So I stay in the business and help grow it. So we have mutual, shared kind of goal of growing the business. And even in the time they bought my business, like, and I think in the first year we grew like 600%. Because they had the marketing spend, the power of their brand and their presence, and then my supply chain. Combine those two, you have this amazing opportunity. And so it's been a great experience of learning how to be strategic. And I actually, if I were, and I have another startup in the golf space as well, an app. And again, when I look at that, I don't want to just sell it, right? I spent 8 years building it. I don't want to just sell it. I have this vision of how do I, one day, how do I find another strategic partner so we can, 1 + 1 = 10. And I think that's an interesting way to look at it. I now look at business acquisitions very differently.
Interesting.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. It makes perfect sense. So somebody that hasn't sold their business, they're thinking, hey, I'm going to get it checked, whatnot. Opportunity presented itself where I think we can bring more value to you guys, and together we could do something special. Well, hey, based on that, we'll form a new partnership and then share in profits.
Yeah.
And that changed your perspective of, let me find opportunities or problems,
Correct.
Create solutions, and then look at companies that could partner my
Absolutely.
solution with what they're already offering.
Absolutely. Instead of trying to build my own channel to the consumer, I went looking for partners that didn't have their own channel. So they had consumers, but they didn't have the supply chain. So I said, let me plug into your network.
I think that's really important for entrepreneurs. You said, instead of building my own channel to consumers, I looked for companies that already had channels that I could plug my product in.
Exactly. And so more recently, so I've got this app called GolfTrak, which is a golf simulator using the cameras on your phone, right? So kind of disrupting the whole golf industry again.
Does that go against the fact that you have a company that sells the box to do it and the equipment?
Well, it's a great question.
To that?
So it's a great question. I get that asked a lot. So we talked about it a lot during the acquisition process, we felt, and I certainly have a very strong feeling, that it is a very different market. It's like trying to say that a Kia competes with a Ferrari, right? So can you be in the same market, right? And you can. You're going for completely different markets and different volume of markets, and so part of the strategy was to keep them separate. So I got to keep this kind of startup on the side, and I've self-funded it, for 8 years, and have an amazing team there that have built that. But again, even there, initially I was building a consumer, because when you build an app, you think I'm going to build a consumer-facing app, right? I'm going to go and sell that to consumers. And I actually made a strategic decision, and it was a hard one. It was actually a hard decision to make, because to go down this B2B path, so B2B to C, I call it, right? So I started speaking to these companies that...
So somebody doesn't know what you said. Can you explain that again?
Absolutely, yeah.
BBC?
So B2B to C is like, I go B2B. So I go to another corporation, say, look, you've got all these customers, in golf, let's say, right? And you're currently giving them this product or this service. Well, what if you had this technology that was under your brand, but you didn't build it, right? And then you just sell it, and then you pay me a ticket, basically a clip of the ticket for the intellectual property, basically a white labeling solution. And as soon as I pivoted to that, I've had amazing growth opportunity. And some of the companies I'm talking to have millions of customers. And so you think, well, instead of going out, you can imagine how expensive it is to get app customers right now. So to be able to access a market of 1 million, 2 million, whatever customers, is really amazing. And you have to kind of make a mindset shift. You know, I think we were talking earlier, it's not about being famous or having power. It's just, like I always say, I don't want to be famous. I just want to be rich. You know, so like I don't need to be the name of everywhere. You know, I'm not going to put my name on a building. You know, but for me, what matters more to me is how do I get my product into millions of people's hands? How do I change their lives? And so the B2B part, and then they are a B2C company, and so combined we have this B2B2C, which allows me to access these customers without building a consumer brand myself. Because what I also realized, and this is kind of that entrepreneurial, I think, self-awareness that you must have. I realized I'm not that interested in building a consumer brand. That doesn't get me excited. I'm a tech guy. I love building cool technology. So I'd rather go and build cool tech and just be kind of invisible in the background versus building a consumer brand, which is a very different skill set. And it's just like, A, I'm not good at it, I don't think. And B, I don't have that much interest in it. You know what I mean?
I was just at my mentor, Patrick Bet-David, taught me the insurance business, helped me build a business.
I love PBD.
And okay, so you know Pat. So we're at the vault, and you know that's one of the things that he talks about is the vault is like, how are you going to make your money? Who are you?
Yes.
Right? What intelligence, right, do you have? And there's different types of intelligence, and you've identified what yours are and how you want to operate. I think it's very similar to the B2B to C. It's very similar to like the merger and acquisition part. Similar in terms of different, where you can leverage, you know, growth so much faster.
Yes.
Than trying to build organically. So it makes sense.
And you can even do, if I can just share one more story.
Please
it was
do.
very inspirational to me. So I started a Masters of Entrepreneurship at Swinburne University in Melbourne many years ago. I dropped out after a year. But the lecturer that was kind of the head of the school, I've forgotten his name actually, but in any case, the story that made him famous and kind of made him start that school was he sold his company for $12 million to Oracle Corporation, right? But here's the interesting part. At the time he sold it, he was losing $2 million a year. And he still got $12 million, right? Because Oracle in the first year took that and made $100 million.
Wow.
Right. So that planted that seed of, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs need to understand, it's not about your EBITDA. It is about what can you do for the acquirer, for your target acquirer, right? How could
That's
they
really, say that a little bit more, because some people aren't going to catch what you just said.
Absolutely. So this example really highlighted that it's not so much what your EBITDA is, or your business growth, or I mean, growth has a lot to do, but what you have in right now, right, for yourself. What your business is for you can be very different to what that business could be for someone else. And so this guy sold a $2 million a year losing company for $12 million, because the next year Oracle, they could see that, hey, if we buy this technology, we could sell it to our customers, and they did, and they made $100 million in that first year. Right, which is similar to what I did, which is what inspired me to do this deal that I did, which is, hey, I believe in my product. I believe in my supply chain and my team. I think with your marketing power, brand, growth, etc., we could 1 + 1 will equal to 10. And that's what we did. And so I think entrepreneurs need to know that for those that think that a sale, an exit, is basically you get your EBITDA and you get an EBITDA multiple and you're done, which is, maybe a lot of private equity companies do that, when they're doing roll up or whatever. But I think if you're building a business and you do think of an exit, I think you're way better off thinking strategically. How do I find a strategic buyer versus just someone who'll give me a multiple for my EBITDA?
Yeah, that's great advice.
Thank you.
Right? That's great advice for people because a lot of times creative people, entrepreneur-driven people, they lack that business sophistication on the backside because they haven't gone through it.
Yeah.
And I think it's more than ever opportunities for people to learn from people like yourself today, the bigger picture of what that looks like. strategy question here, did you disclose to that company that you partnered with that you were already building this app to see if there was a conflict of interest?
Oh, absolutely. And we, I offered for them to, maybe acquire it, maybe this, but because it was still quite early stage, even though it's been around for now 8 years, it was very hard to value because it was unproven. And so, a big corporation that, they're owned by a public company. So, it's very hard to justify that investment. They kind of said, look, when you get to revenue, and that's actually another really interesting lesson, I think, for entrepreneurs is, they think that an exit has to be a certain thing. When you're raising capital, for example, right? You a lot of, especially in the Silicon Valley and here in the Silicon Hills, people think, you're raising on an idea. That can happen, but a lot of time you need to prove that people are willing to pay for it. They're willing to get their credit cards out and give you money.
Yeah.
And so they wanted to see it prove itself before they get involved. And we had a great agreement on that. We had we had to write it up in a contract so that it's the delineation of kind of what I can do and what I can't do, because there's non-competes, there's NDAs, there's confidentiality, all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
In these contracts. So we had to work it out. It wasn't easy, but we had some good lawyers. I had good lawyers, they had good lawyers, and we worked it out. Again, it was when you approach something in a spirit of collaboration, and
that's it, right?
It wasn't adversarial, right? It was a strategic acquisition. So we both wanted, future potential, future growth, etc. So I respect that a lot.
Yeah, it's long-term thinking, integrity. Integrity pays off always.
Correct.
Even if it doesn't pay off, the piece that you get from it is invaluable.
I totally agree.
So, that's like and on the proven income part. That's why Shark Tank, I think, has done so well with people. What's this? And it's just like, cool, we got it off the ground, but we need your channel, your what'd you call it? Your client channel?
Yeah, your sales channel. You need to know what you need to know where your sales are going to come from, right? So what are people willing to pay for it, right? And you also need to know what it costs you to acquire that channel as well. I think those are two really important things.
I was thinking we should start it. You don't live in Austin. You live in
Dallas.
You're in Dallas.
I live in Dallas. Not too far.
You should maybe move here and we start an Austin tank instead of Shark Tank, and we invest in businesses.
Yeah, I love that. I really like Austin, I must say.
So, okay, so let's go back a little bit. You said you became a millionaire at 22? And then
at 22.
What did you build to become a millionaire at 22?
Right. So
1, and then 2, how did you lose it all? And 3, what did you learn from that one?
Oh God, that's a fun story. So when I had my website building business when I was like 16, 17, etc., I worked in .coms through college. So I actually didn't turn up to college. Like I managed to get my degree. I barely passed because I was either building my business or I was working at a .com. I was one of the first .coms in Australia. It was actually in e-commerce, and in hindsight, I wish I stayed in e-commerce. But my parents wanted me to get a real job. They were entrepreneurial to a degree, but IT paid so well. They're like, listen, why don't you go get a good consulting job? You can blah blah blah. And so as soon as I finished college, I went and got myself a job at a big consulting firm. But before that, one of my dad's friends gave me the book, and his name is Igor as well. Right, and he gave me a present, a book called Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. And I read that, I'm like, ooh, this is interesting. And then I played the game, and then I read, so he had an advisor, his name is Dolph DeRoos. He's actually from New Zealand. And he had a book called Real Estate Riches. It was 25 years ago, right? And he basically said, if you have, buy property, renovate it, revalue it, take the equity out, buy the next one, repeat, rinse and repeat. And that's literally what I did. So I had a high-paying job. I was almost 100 grand, was about 100 grand when I was 21 in tech. And so I started buying properties. And my parents helped me buy the first one. And with the help of that, I bought a second one, and then I renovated that, bought a third one. And then, I had 14 properties or something by the time I was 22.
Wow.
Yeah.
You started at how old?
20.
Good for you, man.
Yeah,
That's
two.
Awesome.
I mean, it was
that's inspiring for the 20-years watching this.
Absolutely. So there's a grain of salt that I just want to add to that little, recipe.
Okay.
There's a lot of, I'm doing a lot of stuff on YouTube now and LinkedIn, and sharing my stories and all of that. And I also see other people talking about the secrets to riches, which has been around for God knows how many years, right? And they say, you could, when I was 20, by the time you're 21, you could be a multimillionaire. Listen, the chances of that are so low. And I just got lucky, right? I just got lucky. There was a lot of hard work, but I also got very lucky. And I would say that it's not a great example of how to truly build wealth. So I want to like, there's a lot. That's one of the lessons I learned, is that timing can be one of the most important factors to growth and business and success. And I've had really good timing, and I had really, really poor timing. So I built the property portfolio, but I was also very miserable. I was actually going through really bad depression. I was very lonely. My friends were still in college. I was 22. Like, I had a platinum Amex. In fact, by 23, I got a black Amex. The Centurion.
Yeah.
I got a box. I remember, black mahogany box, and it said, "You've been identified as one of the 900 most affluent people in Australia."
Wow.
Right. And let me tell you, by the time that box arrived, I was so broke, I couldn't buy my own lunch.
Wow.
Right. So this is how things. But what got me to that broke part was I was very depressed. I started going to seminars, reading a lot of self-help books, and a lot of them said you need to quit your job, become an entrepreneur to be happy, or become this or that to be happy. So I quit my job. And but what happened is I was settling on a block of apartments, like a multi-family, and they did something that the bank hadn't done for like a year and a half. They called my employer to check I was still working there, and they said, "Oh no, he quit last month."
Wow.
And the bank pulled the rug from under me. So not only did I lose that acquisition, because I had all my properties with one bank, they're like, "You have 90 days to either sell everything or find another bank to fund you, because you're in breach of contract."
How were you in breach of contract?
Because the contract said that I was, because my serviceability of the loans was tied to my job.
Got it.
Because it was like 120,000 at that point. And so like, well, you're in breach. And Australian banks are pretty, it's not quite as good as American banks, right? They're the most profitable banks in the world, by the way, because they have kind of an oligopoly.
Got it.
And so, and I was 22. I didn't know what I was doing. So I had to fire sell most of my properties. But at the same time, what I did is I took all this equity out and I invested in a business with these 3 schmucks. And I was the 4th schmuck. And I was the biggest schmuck because I'm the one who funded it. And in 3 months, we burned through my whole equity.
Wow.
And the business just blew up and failed. And I was down to my last 20 cents. There's actually, I ended up moving to Brisbane up north because I managed to get a contract to work with this SAP. I used to work for SAP, a big software German giant. And one of their clients, I kind of called them and said, "Hey, do you have anything I could help you with?" And they said, yeah, actually, great. We really liked when you worked here before. Come over. So I moved up to Brisbane. By the time I got to Brisbane, I had 20 cents left. I had nothing else. And I started working with them. And from that point, in 4 years, I built a consulting firm in SAP, doing SAP services to 4.5 million revenue and 22 staff.
Congratulations, from 20 cents to 4.5 million.
Yes.
That's inspiring.
Then back to 20 cents.
Yeah, we'll get to that one. So I got a question. You were making money. You were building real estate. You're becoming a millionaire. Why are you depressed?
So, it's a cliche, but money's not everything, right? And we've all heard it say it, by people. I mean, it's great to have.
Sure. Right.
And what I've learned in my years is there's like a baseline that you need to have to be happy, to be, someone said it to me once, it's a lack of worry, right? When you can have enough that you don't worry about money, and that doesn't have to be a very big amount. But I was overweight. My health was really bad. And my friends were still in college, and I was out working, and I was flying international. I was working in Asia, and in my tech job, I just felt so lonely.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask you.
Yeah.
I was going to say it sounds like it was lonely.
It was loneliness, and it was this kind of despair that kind of overtook me. It was really strange, but that's what I was dealing with. And then when I hit the first rock bottom, it got significantly worse, because then I was also embarrassed, and I lost all this money, and I had probably the worst time. I'm very close to my parents. They've been the most amazing parents and inspiration for me. But that is the worst kind of chapter in our life, is because I was so embarrassed I didn't want to talk to them even. I didn't speak to them for months.
Wow.
Because I was just so embarrassed of what I had done.
That's really tough for a parent to not be able to talk to their kiddo.
Yeah.
Because that's the time where you want to parent.
Yeah, and they could feel it. They have instinct, right?
Yeah.
And so I feel bad for them.
So now you've lost everything. You got 20 cents. For people that are watching this right now and they're in that moment right now, and they got 20 cents, what would be your advice to that person?
I think you have to. It's a great question. You know, I've always had this weird thought process, feeling. I don't even know what label to put on it. That I cannot imagine a life where I do not succeed. I cannot imagine it. It's just not in my reality. And I don't know how. I've always said this, and when my wife and I got married, we were going through a pretty rough time, like in terms of my financial career. I was when we had our first child, Asher, there were times when she'd go to the supermarket, she'd have to take things out of the basket because we didn't have enough money to pay for the groceries. And at the same time, I was living in one of my parents' properties for free because that's how broke I was. And I've always said, I know this is not what I was put on this earth for. I don't know when. There's like my whole thing is like I never knew when am I going to succeed. I just knew I was going to. And so, there's this phrase, right? Everything will be okay in the end. And if it's not okay, it's not the end. And I think anyone else listening or watching this needs to understand that if you choose that path, that everything will be okay in the end. And if it's not okay, it is not the end. Believe it, live it, down to your core. Let that drive you. That because what's the alternative? I had this thing like, what am I? And I went through a period when I was 15 when I had suicidal thoughts. We're living going through a really bad time with my parents were very broke. Nearly fighting every day. Thinking about divorce and all that. And I was 200, to give you an idea, right? When I was like 14, I was 250 pounds.
Wow.
Right? I was
That's
huge.
Yeah.
Right? And all these other factors. But my point comes back to this, that what is your alternative? Like, to check out? Right? That's not an option. And so for me, I was like, I called it, my only alternative that I kind of felt was to what I said, commit emotional suicide, which is to not feel anything. Like, how do you, all I wanted to do, I was like, I either have to go to a place where I can't feel anything and like the world just doesn't exist for me, but I'm still alive, which I just don't know. I don't know how you do that. And I will say I'm very grateful, so grateful that, I didn't get into alcohol or drugs, because I know that's when people can go to those things to escape. I felt that I couldn't do that. And I couldn't, that emotional suicide, I couldn't do that. I'm like, there's got to be a way out of it. And I fought, because that's all I had left was just to fight for every cent, for every dollar, for every $10. I remember when that
That's
moment.
That's powerful. That's all I had left.
Yeah.
Was to fight.
Yeah. That's when we're actually, it's funny. That's when we can become our best, when our back's against the wall, and all you have is just like, you either fold or you just fight. And I don't know, folding was just never an option.
That's so awesome, bro.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's inspiring. I got the chills everywhere. I would ask myself that phrase when I was struggling in the business, like, what is my alternative?
Yeah.
And I would look at all these different scenarios, and they were all a form of choosing comfort and quitting just to have some kind of security at that moment. And while maybe even at moments that was very attractive, I would go into the future and I would say, let's say you're there for a few years, and let's say you're there for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, and then you look back on your life, that was the moment you quit.
Yeah.
How would you look at yourself, and how would you live with yourself? And that just wasn't an option, like you said.
Especially in a place like this, having, like in Russia, if you have nothing, if you're down to your 20 cents and it's winter, you're probably dead. You fall asleep on the street and you freeze to death at night. Like in this country, in Australia, in what I kind of see as, you always have options. Even when you think you don't have options, you have options. Yeah. Just go find them. It's there somewhere.
Even if that option is your attitude
Exactly.
as to how you're going to show up, like I'm going to fight.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember we rented this massive home to do a mastermind with our guys. I didn't have a nice home at the time. I think I had an apartment, and so we rented this $18 million home to do this leadership retreat to sell everybody the dream.
Yeah.
And I remember we had a little bit of money because at that point some stuff was happening. But I remember a partner, a real estate guy, mismanaged, embezzled. It was. I don't think the intention was negative, but the unfortunate characteristic is what it is. Over $1 million. And this was all the money in the world that I had, plus people that knew me, and they were like, hey, we see what you're doing. We want to invest with you. I'm like, yeah, I'm doing this. You can if you want to, Everything is gone. And I'm telling my my videographer at the time, my marketing guy, he's like, so what are you going to do? And I said, what do you mean? I'm going to will it? He's like, I don't get it. I said, I'm going to use my will.
Yeah.
And there isn't any other option besides this working out. So that saying of everything is all right at the end, if it's not all right, then it's not the end. Yeah. I didn't have that saying at that time, but I'm like, this has to get done. It's going to work out. We're going to make it work. If it doesn't work, I'm going to make that work. Yeah. And that's a mentality it just takes.
And just on that, some people take that kind of story and they think they have to, the fake it till you make it thing.
Yeah, I don't agree with that.
No, I don't agree with that either. And I tell when I have, sometimes I share my story with other entrepreneurs, or people ask me for advice or whatever, and I say, use it to your advantage, right? So, Avis, the car rental company,
yes,
they have this great campaign. They were trying to catch up to Hertz. I think Hertz is number one. I don't know. But anyway, I remember they had this campaign, this ad campaign that said, we're number 2 in the market. We'll try harder. Right? To get customers. We will try. They used the fact that they're not the biggest to tell you or why you should pick them. Entrepreneurs can use that. Said, hey, listen, my business is small. I'm trying to grow. I'm going to do everything I can to deliver success to you. If I'm talking to a customer, right? When I was 23, hiring people double my age to work in SAP, this German software company. I was hiring consultants double my age. They had more experience than I was on this earth for, right? But I would go into big corporations. My clients were some of the top tier clients in Australia, and I would say, we're going to deliver the best possible service for the cheapest price because we can, right? We don't have the big offices. I don't have a fancy building, right? I actually had no office. I said, I don't have an office, so I don't need to pay that. I don't need to charge you for that in my consulting rate. And that's how I grew the business, right? So the things a lot of people think as they're kind of growing, right? They think that it's a disadvantage. It can actually be an advantage. It's up here.
Yeah, that's a great story. So you build a consulting business.
Right.
Everything's going good.
Yeah.
Then you lose it again. Was it a timing thing?
No. It was similar to what you just shared. It was actually fraud.
Okay.
So halfway through going this business, I had this couple working for me, and running the projects, and I realized I realized it a bit earlier, but it kind of really matured in me. I'm pretty good at sales, and so these guys were like contracting, and I said, look, how about like a 1099 equivalent here, right? Like, how about you come work for me and I'll give you. So I didn't sell. The big mistake. Talk about lessons. I didn't sell them part of the business. I gave them 40% of my company. I said, come work with me. I'll give you 40%. We'll build it together. But halfway through that growth, we're about 1.6 million at that point. And so they came on board. 2 years later, we're at 4.5 million. And I remember waking up. It was July. This is so vivid in my memory. It was July. It was in Sydney. I was on a project, like doing some account management with Village Roadshow, which is a big distribution, like a movie distribution company in Australia. And I wake up in my hotel room in a panic attack. And I'm like, I have to get these people out of my business. Something's wrong. And I spoke to I had some mentors who I was paying for, and they weren't as good as I had hoped they were, because I'm pretty convincing, right? When I'm trying to like convince someone. And I managed to convince them that everything will be okay. And I wish they pushed back and told me, no, it's not okay. Get your lawyers involved, because I was literally calling my lawyers that morning. And in the end, I put it aside. 6 months later, almost to the day, 6 months later, 1st of January 2007, they rerouted 80% of the income from my company to a secret company they set up on the side.
Wow.
Because they had some friends in procurement in these big mining companies. And I literally, so I lost almost $4 million of revenue overnight, but kept all the costs. And this was a nervous breakdown kind of moment, because I came up from nothing to this. I was making good money. I was 27. I was like top of the world, and then this happens, and I'm like, I'm going to sue them. And Australia is not quite like America, where you can just sue anyone. It's a bit harder, more expensive in some ways. But I had met this amazing woman, Carolyn, who I call her my mother 2.0 now. Right, she's an amazing woman, and she became a mentor to me. And she said, you can spend $750,000 suing them next 2 years. They'll just declare bankruptcy. You won't get a cent. You'll be another $1 million down the drain. She's like, take the energy, take whatever money you have, rebuild the business. And I did. And I started rebuilding it. And I hired a great team. I managed to, it took me about a year to kind of get back up a little bit. Had borrowed like another $500,000 or something. And 2008, actually it was less than a year. In fact, I can remember because the timing, the global financial crisis hit. I won $750,000 of projects. And in that 1 week, I got a call from all 3 companies canceling the projects.
Wow.
So I lost everything again.
So you get back on your feet.
I got back on my feet.
Bam, now
went
it's
more
a global
into debt,
crisis.
and then gone.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So now what happens?
6 months of eating a lot of ice cream and playing computer games at my parents' house. I couldn't handle the world. I just couldn't do it. That was like mental shutdown, So I did that. That was, my drug of choice was sugar in the form of ice cream. And when I stopped feeling sorry for myself.
What's your favorite ice cream?
So I do love like chocolate ice cream, but I have this thing where I love crushed peanuts.
Okay.
On top, like almost like as much peanuts as the ice cream. It just,
okay.
The crunchiness just does it for me. And when I stopped feeling sorry for myself, I'm like, I need to go get income. I need to go make some money. And I, put together another, CV, resume, and went and got a job consulting. And that's when I was working at Australia Post. And when I ended up buying that GolfTek business with my friend.
Got it.
Right. So I just started climbing I started making enough money to pay off my debt that I got myself into. And then I went and bought another business. And
that's phenomenal, man.
Yeah, but and that was like a little bit up, and then it crashed down again. As I said, lost the second venue, and then I have this other mentor who's a mentor of mine now, Natasha, and I ran into her, I remember, on the street, and this phrase, I always remind her of this. She's like, I started telling her about one of my startups, and she just stopped me. She just said, listen, grow the F up, get a job, pay off your debt, look after your family. When you've done that, come talk to me. And she walked off. And I'm like, okay. So I literally did that. And then I ran into her in Sydney on a train, I remember. And I'm like, hey, Natasha. She's like, oh, hi. It's like, hey, I grew the F up. I got a job. I paid off my debt. Can we talk now? She's like, yeah, meet me in the office next week.
What a great
story.
Now
she is co-owner of my company, and she's one of my most amazing mentors. So, it kind of
story, Igor.
Yeah, thank you.
So I want to be respectful of your time. I got a couple last questions.
Of course.
This book.
Yes, Practical Manifestation.
Why did you write it?
So, out of anger and frustration. And so I wrote this book actually in 2007. Interestingly enough, I didn't publish it for 15 years.
Shane told me that. I was like, I don't understand.
And in fact, the game, which I'm sure we'll talk about, imposter syndrome. I wrote it, and I'm like, why would anyone want to know what I have to say? Considering my failures and my, what I felt like failures, and what I didn't have it in me, to share with the world. And then, once I sold my company, once I felt different. I felt like I was a different person. I felt it was a really good message. But I wrote it. Do you remember the movie The Secret?
Yes.
Okay, so there's a moment. Even a particular moment in that movie. I threw my hands up in the air. I'm like, this is it. I do not accept this. I'm going to do something about it. Which is, there's a guy sitting on a couch similar to this with a plastic steering wheel, imagining their dream car, and then all of a sudden the dream car's in the driveway. I'm like, listen, buddy, that's not how it works.
Correct.
Okay, that's not going to happen. And so, shortly after watching that movie, I was a project manager. I was a tech project manager, and I'm like, I approached things that I wanted in life, and where I got to in life and where I am now. I felt I was very particular in how I designed it. I have a very good imagination for how I want my life to be and my family's life, to a crazy level of detail, right? And which is what I believe you need to have if you truly want to achieve amazing things in life. Because people say to me, I want a Ferrari. Okay, which one? Like, what do you mean? Well, they've made like 100 different models. Which one? Well, I don't know. So, well, how do you know how to get it then? Like, you don't know how much it costs. You don't know what it is. You don't know, do you want to own it? Do you want to rent it? Do you want to like own it outright? Do you want to lease it? Like, which one? I don't know. Well, how are you going to achieve it? And so I sat down and I wrote that book to kind of go, well, how would a project manager approach manifestation, right? This self-help sort of, bit of a wishy-washy subject as I believe it has been in the past. And so I wrote the book and I published it, and, amazingly it hit, bestseller list on Amazon already. And I've got another book coming out in January called Agile Manifestation, because I'm an Agile project manager, right? I run my software development in Agile. And I'm like, why do companies like Spotify or SpaceX or Tesla or whatever, they create the most unbelievable technologies, right? Things that are like science fiction 5 years ago. They don't do it by, doing mantras and light therapy, right? They have a plan and they execute. And so my whole thing is like, if you want to have a dream life, you need a plan and you need to execute. And that's what these books are for. They to take you through that process.
So this would be ideal. Tell me who's the ideal reader for this.
So the ideal reader is really someone who feels like they want more in life and they're ready to be practical about it, to actually execute. Look, unless you are ready to, get your hands dirty, do the work, right? If you just want to sort of dream about it, put things on your dream board and look at it when you wake up in the morning and hope that it, if you're at that hope stage, that's not for you. If you're ready to work at it,
that's great. There's so many books that talk about the mentality but don't have the practicality to it.
And that's what I found. And I was kind of surprised, why are not more people talking about it? And what I love at the moment, that I feel like there's a bit of a renaissance in this whole content world, where people like I watch a lot of Alex Hormozi, and there's a lot of other people. Just a lot of people probably heard about Alex Hormozi by now, but I love that people are giving away this very practical stuff on YouTube, and they're saying like, this is how they're giving very practical long form explanations of how to actually do things, and still a lot of people don't even do that, right?
Correct.
So my view, but at least they're now giving away. Was before, I felt a lot of books or courses were very like wishy-washy. They were like, you change your mind, you have to change your mindset. Okay, but how? There were very few people that I felt that gave very practical solutions, and I wanted to be in the practical camp.
When does Agile come out?
It should be published in January.
Okay, and what's the difference between practical and Agile?
So again, I was a bit of a different person when I wrote this book, so it still has, me from 15 years ago, but it's got some really great stories and examples of how to do it. Agile is really more modern, I feel, and I wrote it last year, and it takes it to that next level. It breaks it down to more specific detail around breaking tasks down into very, very small tasks. So it narrows it down even more.
This would be the first read then?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. Do you need to read this to read Agile?
Not at all, no. I think both, they're a little bit different, but they almost reinforce each other.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then probably one of my few last questions, what's up with the game? I picked this game up. This is probably the heaviest game I've felt. So I don't know what's in it.
Well, there's so much knowledge in it. It's that heavy, right?
Yes.
So, funny story. I wrote this game 15 years ago too. I started developing it 15 years ago, and But last year, again, similar to the book, I felt I had something to share with the world. And it was this moment of realization. We touched upon it a little bit before. And in fact, the questions you ask kind of really relate to the game, which is, what made you who you are today? And to me, people ask, would you go back and change any of these really painful experiences you've had, right? These failures. And now my answer is, like, going through it, I would probably say, yeah, I'd love to change where I am now. In hindsight, I wouldn't change a thing. Because if I didn't have those experiences, if I didn't go through every single thing that's in that past, I wouldn't be sitting right here, right now, telling you this story. And so my idea with Entrepreneurship became, I wanted to design a way, inspired by Kiyosaki and Cashflow 101, I wanted to gamify the experiences I had and the people I read about and my friends who are entrepreneurs. And I actually have a mission to take the experiences of all the entrepreneurs out in the world. I want to collect it. I want to crowdsource it. And I want to put it into a game and let people buy expansion packs, which are cards from other people's experiences. Right? But the cards are in that game, and there's opportunities, which is pretty normal, right? But my favorite one is called Encounters. And I bet you're going to like this one. The encounter cards are like, you pick it up and it had, basically it's someone you meet and they have an effect on your business or your life. So there's a card in there that you meet someone who you think is going to be your mentor. They seem really amazing. They end up stealing $100,000 from you. That literally happened to me. Right? He charged $100,000 to my black Amex to buy new wheels for his Ferrari and buy Grand Prix tickets. And then he ended up being a con man, right? That fleeced people. Or you meet a great mentor and they improve your profitability by 10%, right? But there are cards like that. There's cards in there called Get Lucky, because sometimes you get lucky. It's part of the game. You know, I got lucky with property and then I got unlucky with property, right? There's cards in there called Deal With It. That's my second favorite, which is, you know what? Life happens, deal with it. And so my purpose with the game is to let everyone out there experience entrepreneurship, the real thing, not the rose-colored glasses thing, right? To the real thing, you know, I call being punched in the face on a daily basis, in a fun way. And I made it as a board game. People ask me, are you going to make an app? No, I'm not going to make an app, because I want you to sit at a table with other people who want to be entrepreneurs. I want you to share that experience around the table, laughing, failing together, succeeding together, but sharing that experience in a social way. And that's kind of, because when I played Cashflow 101, that was a really great part of the experience. And there were all these clubs like Meetup. Now there's meetup.com, and I hope to create, either a school.com or a meetup community where people can kind of be the game masters and bring entrepreneurs together. Do you know how many entrepreneurs there are in the world? It's estimated to be?
No, tell me.
600 million. Now, statistics say that only 1 in 9 succeed. That means there are 8 businesses that fail for every one that succeeds. By my count, that's 5 billion failed businesses. Imagine the stories behind all those. Imagine the lessons.
Oh, yeah.
Because I've started over 20 businesses, right? If you look at my success rate, I'm like dead on 1 in 9, right? Because I've started so many. A serial entrepreneur, right?
But you just keep going, man.
I just keep going.
I love that. You play this with your kids?
Yeah. Well, and it teaches you play it with like an income statement, a balance sheet. It teaches you financial literacy, which is another thing. Yeah. So my son's just getting, he's already asking about how to, he knows about profitability. He knows about sales. He's
This your 10-year-old?
Yeah, almost 10. He's not even 10 yet, but he's already like, he asked me the other day, we were a chiropractor, and he said to me, and the chiropractor was there, he nearly fell over. He's an entrepreneur as well. He's a great chiropractor. And but my son sitting goes, Papa, can I ask you a business question? I'm like, sure. He's like, is it better to have, like, when you have multiple businesses, is it better to have it in like one sort of industry or like across multiple industries? And like we both, Dr. Ryan and I were like looking at him going, how old is this kid?
That's so great, man.
So yeah,
that's so great.
Proud dad moment.
Yeah. How many people to play the game? 2, 3?
You can play by yourself if you want.
You could play by
yourself. You could play, but yeah, definitely. But it's 2 to 6, I think, or 8.
Okay.
I should know that, but
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll probably try it with our marketing team, and our office managers.
Yeah, love your feedback. Let me know how.
I
what
definitely
you think.
will give it to you. Igor, it's been great having you on, man. I have respect
you.
for your time. I won't ask more questions. I do have more. Maybe we could do a part 2.
I would love to do part 2. I love Austin. Love coming back. Thank you for having me. It's been such a fun conversation. I appreciate you.
You got great energy. The advice that you give, it's real. It's applicable. It's admirable to see somebody fail, start over, fail, start over, fail, start over, and just to keep going and then keep winning, keep learning, keep improving, keep playing that game in real life. So great having you, brother. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Guys, we'll put your contact info, how to get a hold of you. Do you work with entrepreneurs? Do you coach entrepreneurs? Do you speak?
Look, I'm trying to build a community. So I do some speaking. I do keynote speaking, especially about the game and stuff. But look at my book, look at my LinkedIn, look at my my personal website. Just reach out. You know what? I love talking to entrepreneurs. I don't care if I don't work with you. I'm not here for that. I just love the stories that exist out there, and so that fills my cup.
That's great, man. Well, guys, I hope you got some value. We'll put all the contact information in the link and the details. Thank you for being on and watching this episode. If you think that somebody would find value from it, other business owners, share it with them, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.